Hello, Miss Tyne here to show you our lesson for today for math. So for math today, we're thinking again about our book, A Cloak for the Dreamer. Now there were three sons in A Cloak for the Dreamer, and two of the sons made very beautiful cloaks out of rectangles, squares, and triangles that all fit very nicely. All the pieces fit very nicely together with no gaps and no holes. And then we had our third son, Misha, who fit his cloak together. His cloak pieces were all circles, and he didn't fit them together very well. When he made his cloak, there were a lot of holes, and it wasn't going to keep anybody very warm. So what we're doing today is we're thinking about ways that we can take our own quilt squares that you made last week and not turn them into a cloak, but turn them into a quilt. So I took pictures and Mr. Ratter and Mrs. Hedstrom helped me do this too. We took pictures of many of your quilt squares that you made, and we're trying to think of the best way that we can arrange them to make a quilt. So I'll be using something that looks a little bit like this to kind of map out how I want to place all of my quilt squares. But the really important thing to know is that I only have 24 of these squares. So I need to think about how I can arrange my squares into a rectangle. Now, when quilters make a quilt, they usually choose a rectangle because that's kind of the shape of most beds, and quilts tend to fit really well on beds. So we're going to think about some good ways we can make rectangles. Now, here are some good examples of rectangles. One right here, you can see that all of the squares are fit right up next to each other. None are overlapping, they're all still a square. There's no gaps and no holes. The same with this one here. But our two lighter blue examples, these are not rectangles because we have a hole right here and another hole right here. That's not going to keep you warm. So what you're working on in Seesaw today is going to look a little something like this. It's called our quilt layout problem. Now we have these 24 beautiful blocks or squares from our class quilt that we want to make. So what you're going to do is you're going to take these different color squares to represent your quilt blocks. You're giving Miss Tyne some really good ideas on how to arrange our quilt blocks. And you're going to move them into rows that go across like this, and columns that go up and down to make a rectangle. Now make sure that with each rectangle that you make, you're only using 24 blocks. So you'll move all the colored tiles around to make two rectangles out of 24 blocks. And then you're going to make a text box or use the drawing tool to create an equation to show how many tiles or blocks are in each row. Now I'm going to show you an example of what that might look like for you. Now here are some good rectangles that we could make with our 24 squares. So we have here's what I need. So we have in our example here, in our first row, remember rows go across. They'll go across. There it is, just like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares in our first row. So when I'm writing my equation, I'm writing down how many squares are in a row. So my first row has 6 squares. Now my second row, remember, to make it a rectangle, my second row should be exactly the same as my first row. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares again. Perfect. Now 6 plus 6 is a double. That gives us 12. Right here, 6 plus 6 is 12. You might want to write some notes for yourself on the side to help you remember. Now, if I'm going to keep making this a rectangle, I know my next row needs to be the same. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I know that my next row has to be the same with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I add that to my equation. And now again, I know that 6 plus 6 is a double, and it gives me 12. And I know that 12 plus 12 is a double, and that gives me 24. So I have 24 blocks in my first rectangle. Now in my second rectangle, I'm counting my rows again. So I'm counting again that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares. And I've written it down right here. And to make a rectangle, my second row must be exactly the same. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 again. And there I've written it in my equation. And my last row must also have 8. Now I'm just going to do some quick checking before I'm not sure that this is exactly right. I don't want to go over 24. So I know 8 and 8 is a double. So 8 plus 8 is a double. That makes 16. So now I'm just going to count up from 16 to double check my work. So my next square in my rectangle is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And that's my next number in my equation. So I have 8 squares in my last row. 8 plus 16 is 24. And now I've checked my work to show my equation that I have 8 squares in each row to make our 24 squares. And then I have 6 squares in each row to make our 24 squares. Now, I'm going to take all of your ideas when you finish this assignment today, and I'm going to make our quilt. So make sure you finish this assignment so you can see what our quilt is going to look like. And when our quilt is finished, I will show you how it's going to look tomorrow in an announcement. So you can see what that's going to look like. But I did try already to make one, and I'm not sure if it's the best arrangement. But I do want to I want you to let me know what you think of it. So you do have 2 pages to do on Seesaw today. And the second page is going to look like this. Oops. Let's see. There we go. Again, I've created a little quilt for us to see if we like it. And I want to know, what do you notice about this arrangement that I've made? So just take a moment to look at this picture. Look at this picture here and all the quilt squares together. And I want you to think about how many rows you see, how many columns you see, and what else you notice. List 3 things that you notice right here. Now, you don't have to type them. You can use the microphone tool and tell me, but make sure you take a moment to look at your second page on Seesaw today. That's your math lesson and your assignment for this Tuesday. I'm excited to see you later and talk about any questions that you might have. All right, see you soon.